He said, "Say that again, sweetheart," stretching her accent till it sounded like a joke. The table laughed. Quick, careless, the kind that stings more because it sounds so easy. Maria froze. The pot of coffee hung midair, steam drifting toward the fan. Then she poured, slow and steady, the tremor in her hand saying what her face didn't. "Anything else?" she asked, her voice even. "No, ma'am," the man said, still grinning. "That'll do it." The bell above the diner door jingled again, mixing with the scrape of forks and the hum of the air conditioner. Everything looked normal. It just didn't feel that way. Maria walked back to the counter and wiped an already clean spot. The formica was cool under her hand. Her reflection looked calm, too calm. Only her jaw moved, pulsing on its own. At the far end, two old men talked about the Braves game. Someone ordered another round of pancakes. The jukebox clicked and played a song she'd heard 1,000 times. But she could still hear that voice, stretching her words, that fake drawl rolling over her like static. When she turned, the tourists were taking photos of their food, posing like they were in on some kind of Americana performance. One of them looked her way, half smiled, and lifted his phone again. She kept her eyes on the coffee maker, watching the dark drip fall into the pot. Her hands moved automatically. Rinse, pour, wipe, repeat, while her mind replayed the moment on a loop. The lunch rush passed. The laughter faded. Only the smell of fried onions and old coffee remained, heavy in the air. When the shift finally ended, she stood in the empty diner and listened to the hum of the refrigerators. The sound filled the silence, but not enough. She wished she could scrub the sound out of her head. The video showed up that night. Her friend Kelsey sent it with a single text. "Is this you?" Maria didn't answer. The clip was short, 20 seconds, maybe less. Her voice, saying coffee or sweet tea, twisted into that man's mocking version. The caption read, "Authentic rural experience faced with tears of joy, #Southern Vibes." They had tagged the diner. She watched it twice. The second time, she caught the detail that hurt most, the sound of her own laugh at the end, small, nervous, trying to smooth it over. She turned off the phone. The kitchen clock ticked loud, each second sharper than the last. Outside, cicadas droned. Inside, the house felt hollow, like the air itself had stopped trusting her. She opened the fridge, stared at a half-empty bottle of creamer, then shut it. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the silence pressed against her ribs. By morning, she'd already told herself it didn't matter. She tied her apron, tucked her hair behind her ear, and walked the mile to work like every day. The sky was pale, the kind of blue that fades before the sun decides what to do with it. Inside the diner, everything was where it belonged. Sugar packets, pie slices, the smell of bacon grease. Routine. That was what she had left. The owner, Frank, came out from the kitchen holding a piece of chalk. "Need you to update the board, Han," he said, nodding toward the wall behind the register. "Locals only" was written across the top in looping white letters. Underneath, a list of regulars, some crossed out, some fresh. Maria wiped her hands on her apron and looked at the blank space waiting near the bottom. Her throat felt dry. She took the chalk. It squeaked once against the slate, a sharp, thin sound that cut through the morning hum. Frank had already turned away. The place smelled of coffee and bleach and something faintly sweet, maybe syrup. Maria stood there for a long moment, the chalk cool between her fingers, her reflection caught in the glass pie case beside her. She already knew whose name she'd write. The chalk squeaked again, louder this time. "Atlanta Regulars," she wrote in her neat cursive, letters slanting slightly to the right. Beneath it, she added, "Special attention needed." The sound drew a few heads. Beth, the morning waitress, paused while stacking cups. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, half smiling. Maria shrugged. "Just keeping the list updated." Beth grinned like she understood something without needing it explained. By the afternoon, the board had already become a conversation. Someone at the counter whispered, "You see what she wrote?" Someone else laughed under their breath. No one erased it. That evening, a trucker named Dale came in for his usual burger and coffee. He pointed at the board. "That new category, Atlanta regulars. You mean those loud folks from last time?" Maria didn't answer, but the way she looked at him was enough. Dale chuckled, low and approving. "Guess I'll make sure they get their special attention." Huh? The code started there. Quiet, unspoken, spreading faster than any joke should. By the end of the week, everyone knew what Atlanta regulars meant. It wasn't written anywhere else. Just that chalkboard, that squeaky little line of letters that carried more weight than it looked. No one planned revenge. It didn't feel like that. It felt like balance. The next time a group of strangers walked in talking too loud, the air in the diner changed just slightly. The regulars went quiet. The servers moved slower, careful, polite. The new arrivals never noticed, but the silence had a shape, wide, steady, and deliberate. Maria worked through it all like nothing had changed. Same rhythm, same calm smile. But when her eyes met Beth's across the counter, they shared a glance that said more than words could. In the small towns, that was how things worked. You didn't need to fight to be heard. Sometimes all it took was a name on a board. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. They came back on a Saturday. Different clothes, same voices. The kind that filled a room before anyone wanted them to. Maria saw them the second they walked in. 4 of them, laughing about the heat, sunglasses still on, asking for a real country breakfast. Beth caught her eye. No words. Just that look. The place was half full. Regulars at the counter, a family by the window, Dale in his usual booth stirring his coffee slow. The diner went quiet for a second. Way too quiet. "Table for 4? One of the men asked, smiling like nothing had ever happened. Maria nodded, took the menus, led them to a booth. The bell above the door jingled once, soft and thin. They sat, kept talking, oblivious. She laid the menus down, felt one of them glance up at her. "Hey, didn't we?" he started, but she was already gone. At the counter, Frank flipped pancakes. Beth poured coffee for Dale, who didn't stop watching the table. Nobody rushed. Nobody served them. Minutes passed. The tourists looked around, confusion spreading across their faces. The laughter died first, then the talking, the sound of forks, the shuffle of napkins, the clink of ice in glasses. Everything else went on as usual, just not for them. "Excuse me," one of them called out. "Can we get some service here?" Frank didn't turn around. Beth kept refilling cups that were already full. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was deliberate, heavy, full of everything no one needed to say. Maria stood by the pie case, wiping the same spot over and over. From the reflection in the glass, she saw them fidget, one pulling out his phone, another muttering something about bad service. Finally, the man who'd mocked her accent stood up. "Forget this place," he said, tossing a napkin onto the table. They left, bell jingling sharp on the way out. Maria didn't look up until the sound was gone. No one had to say a word. The diner emptied out slow that night. Chairs flipped onto tables. Lights dimmed one row at a time. The hum of the refrigerators filled the room again. That same sound from the day everything changed. Maria stayed behind, wiping down the counter. The rag smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and coffee grounds. Her hands moved without hurry now. The chalkboard still hung by the register. Locals only. The list had grown. New names, old ones, a few crossed through. At the very bottom, faint but visible even under the low light, the words Atlanta regulars, special attention needed. She picked up the chalk, ran her thumb along the edge. It left a thin white line on her skin. For a moment, she thought about erasing it, clearing the board, starting fresh. But then she set the chalk down instead, exactly where it had been. Frank came out from the kitchen, tossing a towel over his shoulder. You closing up? Yeah, she said. He nodded, checked the register, and left her the keys. The bell above the door gave one last tired jingle. When the headlights from his truck faded outside, Maria stood alone in the quiet. She turned toward the board, watching the chalk letters catch the faint red glow from the exit sign. Her phone sat on the counter. She opened the video, her voice, their laughter, and watched it once more. No anger this time, just distance. She held her thumb on the screen until it asked, "Are you sure?" "Yes," she whispered. The click was soft, final. Outside, trucks passed on the highway. Inside, nothing moved. She turned off the lights, one by one, until only the chalkboard glowed under the red exit sign. At the door, she looked back at the words she'd written weeks ago. She took a breath, then said quietly, "Y'all come back now." The sound of chalk still meant something. Not forgiveness, not anger. Just a memory that decided to stay.